Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
Later on today's pod, Tommy talks to California Congresswoman, national treasure, Katie Porter.
Can I just pause for a second and say,
please.
The 30 minutes I spent talking with Congresswoman Katie Porter is the best I've felt in like 3 days.
Well, now I'm really excited to listen.
Which is nice. Look, she's not like, she didn't invent a cure. I hate to break it to everybody, but she is so competent and thoughtful, and it's just nice to know that people like that are in government, and hopefully Mnuchin and others will listen to him. Sorry.
Excellent. Also, if you want to know more about coronavirus from an expert, Dr. Abdul El Sayed is back to give us updates on the coronavirus crisis and everything you need to know in America Dissected Coronavirus. It's calm, factual, and in language that you can understand. There will be new episodes on Tuesdays and Fridays. You can subscribe to America Dissected on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, a quick note from us on 2020. We would have already passed the coronavirus economic relief bill were it not for Mitch McConnell taking the long weekend off. He was at an event with his buddy Brett Kavanaugh.
Unbelievable.
Which is just one more reason why the Democrats have to flip the Senate in November. You can help do that by donating to our Get Mitch or Die Trying fund, where the money goes to the eventual Democratic nominee in 10 of the most competitive races. Here are the 10 most competitive races in our view as of now: Arizona, Colorado, Maine, North Carolina, Montana, Kansas, Iowa, Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan. For example, this is how this works. When North Carolina Democrat Cal Cunningham won his Senate primary the other week, we sent him a check for $66,000, thanks to all of you listeners, all of you Crooked Media fans. So if you can, please donate at votesaveamerica.com/getmitch.
Fun name feels a little literal at this point, but, I get it. I get the spirit.
Get Mitch.
Get Mitch or...
Just get Mitch.
Just get Mitch.
All right, let's talk about the crisis at hand. We still don't know the extent of the coronavirus outbreak in the U.S. because of how little testing has been done, but the disease has left 50 dead and at least 3,000 infected, a number that will likely skyrocket this week. As of this morning, the governors of California, Ohio, Illinois, Massachusetts, Washington, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have ordered the closure of schools, bars, dine-in restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, casinos, and other public facilities. Here in California, Governor Newsom directed all Americans over 65 and those with underlying physical conditions to self-isolate at home. And on Sunday, the CDC recommended that all events throughout the entire country, including 50 or more people, be canceled for the next 8 weeks. Guys, why are governors taking these very drastic steps, and are they enough?
I mean, I thought Governor Cuomo in New York put this well. This is a national pandemic, but there are no national rules. And Fauci, the head of the CDC, is doing his best, but I can't help but see the disconnect between what he's saying on Sunday shows that he would do for himself, that he wouldn't travel, that he wouldn't go to public places or restaurants, and the lack of a national closure of bars and restaurants. And this is all being left to states and governors and county level municipalities to manage it. And it's making me lose my fucking mind, because when I look at Twitter or Instagram and you see Bourbon Street packed, or spring break still happening, or St. Patty's Day's bars with lines out the door in Chicago, social distancing does not work if we all aren't part of it, if we're not participating. If you are at a bar with 200 people, it's not that you are young and you're going to be fine and you won't get that sick and everything will be okay. It's that you could give it to someone else that is immunocompromised or old, and you could kill them. You could murder these people if you do not take personal responsibility. And everyone who thinks this is not a big deal, it's only impacting old people, like, we all know somebody who we used to work with who is literally a specimen of a fucking human being, one of the most healthy people I've known, played football in college, served in the military, has been battling coronavirus for 5 or 6 days now, and is just leveled, absolutely leveled, unlike anything he's ever dealt with before. And if you think that's not a big deal, you're crazy. So pardon me for browbeating listeners who are probably doing the right thing, since I know you people, you're pretty cool, but yell at your kids and your cousins and your friends to get your shit together. And more importantly, yell at the federal government to put clear rules in place, yell at state and local governments to put clear rules in place. Like, we need to shut stuff down now before it's too late.
This is why we have a government. This is why you need a president and national leadership. This is why the conservative vision of government, that everyone just volunteers to do the right things, right? That you don't pay taxes, you just give to charity, and that'll do enough. Like, you can't always count on people doing the right thing for the larger community. That's why you have regulations and rules. And right now, we don't have a president. We don't have a real president who is putting in place rules and regulations to protect the country, and that is why this response, as you said, is completely patchwork and it's state dependent. But guess what? Like, state-dependent responses don't work in a country where there's 50 states and you can cross borders. Same thing globally. I mean, right? Like Cuomo said, this is a national pandemic, but there are no national rules. There are also no global rules, and it doesn't seem to be that there's a global response of leaders getting together to work on this together.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the situation will be right now. Forget national rules, forget all of that. If Trump had just done the step of declaring a national emergency earlier,
Right.
and if Trump had just taken a better tone earlier,
Yeah.
would Post Malone have done a show in a packed arena if Donald Trump had not been saying it's going to be fine and if you're young, you'll be fine? Would people be packing the streets and the bars if there was a coherent argument from a national leader that everyone recognized saying this is real, this is serious,
Not
stay
just
stoned?
a national argument, though. Donald Trump picks up the phone, gets all 50 governors on the phone, and says, "Shut it fucking down by tomorrow."
But also,
that's all that had to happen.
to Lovett's point, I mean, NBC, Wall Street Journal did a poll, and 47% of respondents express less or no concern about the impact of the coronavirus. That seems to track pretty consistently with political parties. And you know, when you're seeing Trish Reagan on Fox Business News, or, you know, like, look, this guy David Clark, who no one should have heard of because he's an actual lunatic. He's a sheriff in Milwaukee whose horrible practices led to the death of people. He's one of the worst people on the planet. But he speaks at CPAC every year. He spoke at the Republican National Convention. Last night he was tweeting that no one has gotten to the bottom of how George Soros is contributing to the coronavirus, right? And like that kind of madness and disinformation is going to lead people not to take easy steps in their own lives to just not put themselves or others at risk.
Well, there's two problems here, right? So if the Republican Party is a party of rural America and ex-urban America, and this is a pandemic that is first striking big cities, right? So if you are an average Republican voter, you are sitting in some far-flung suburb or in a rural part of America where you do not see the virus affecting anyone yet. And what are you watching? You're watching Fox News. You're watching Donald Trump. You're following all your favorite Trumpy Republican politicians online, and they're all telling you it's a hoax. It doesn't matter. The governor of Oklahoma put up a picture saying, "Eating with my kids and all my fellow Oklahomans at a local restaurant, packed tonight." Devin Nunes, as one of you pointed out earlier, was saying, if you're healthy, you and your family, it's a great time to just go out and go to a local restaurant. This is a fucking congressman.
Devin Nunes, everybody. Look, obviously this is very serious, but I don't think we need to give up the things we care about most. That's why I'm once again leading the annual Bobbing for Apples at the Central Valley State Fair. Line up with your kids and elderly parents. We're bobbing for apples.
I mean, like Trump said at one of the press conferences over the weekend when pressed on this, "I don't take responsibility at all." And I think that quote is going to define his presidency. He does not want to own this. He wants to play down the health risks because he thinks that might help him with the stock market in the near term. And it is so back-assward in approach that it's going to make everything worse. And then on top of that, I mean, Jared Kushner has now been put in charge of the coronavirus response. Jared and Stephen Miller wrote the Oval Office address that had to be corrected 3 times on Twitter right after the speech. I mean, like,
And Jared also deputized Carly Kloss's dad to crowdsource suggestions on Facebook.
Listen,
for the
I wasn't in the White House still when the Ebola crisis hit, but I was in a million NSC meetings during my time at the White House. And like the health pandemic issues tended to be managed by the same people that did like counterterrorism, things like that. And so John Brennan, Susan Rice, Dennis McDonough, those people, Tom Donilon, they would be leading those meetings as well as the health related ones. And the times you saw those people frightened to their core were the health-related issues. It was the pandemics. It was the viruses. That's why they set up this NSC office. It wasn't a thing to say you did. It was a critical, urgent need because we kind of think we know how to stop an Al-Qaeda fucking suicide bomber. We have no idea how to stop a brand new novel coronavirus that's raging across the world.
And again,
we just don't.
Look, you know, some of their conservatives, Trumpy people have been saying, "Oh, this is some liberal hoax, media hoax to take down Donald Trump," of course, which means that Italy is in on the hoax as well, and so is like China and South Korea and all these other places. But look at the difference between what is happening in Italy and what has happened in South Korea. Even if you don't want to take China as an example, because people don't know exactly if all the information is true out of China. Yeah. South Korea, they ramped up the testing. They took it seriously. They took social distancing very, very seriously. They shut things down. In South Korea, the curve has been flattened. And now, I think yesterday was the cases came down. And in Italy, in northern Italy, the wealthiest part of that country, great hospitals, wealthy population, they are overrun, and they have had to shut down the entire country. And even still shutting down the country, the deaths are spiking every single day. That is where we are headed if we do not take this seriously.
The idea that what we're seeing is a panic is so dangerous and stupid. It's very frustrating. Like, where is the panic? Is it Anthony Fauci? I don't think you're suggesting he's panicking. Is it the airlines who are shutting down service because no one's flying and they're being told that it's not safe to fly international? I don't think they're panicking. I think they're responding to events. Are you saying that the markets are panicking? Is that what it is? The markets are panicking? Okay, well, every stock sold is a stock bought, right? This is what is happening. This is the collective judgment of the entire financial system about what we're about to go through. So the only thing I can think is we are not panicking enough. When I see those lines of people at the fucking St. Patrick's Day bar, when I see the Post Malone concert, when I see the O'Hare Airport crowds.
We haven't even talked about that.
But that the administration wasn't ready for, people coming into customs, making this whole crisis worse. I think we haven't panicked enough. And the one thing I just wanted to say about that too is, I do feel like we're seeing so many of our cultural problems sort of explode because of this. And obviously one of them is the virus of the mind that has infected people like Devin Nunes about how to talk about politics. But also the divide between news users and people that don't follow the news.
Yeah.
That people say all the time, Twitter's not real life, Twitter's not real life. This is a situation where we might be looking at a bunch of people who follow the news really closely, engage in it, reacting appropriately, and a bunch of people who don't, tuning it all out. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us.
The virus is real life.
The virus certainly is in real life and not on Twitter. So the thing I would just say is this is a situation where Twitter has to become real life and take your message to the people in your life that don't follow the news.
Yes.
I want to end by talking about the economic fallout, but Michael just sent us this breaking news. Mike DeWine of Ohio announces that voting will be extended until June 2nd, that no in-person voting will happen tomorrow in Ohio. He said, quote, "It is clear that tomorrow's in-person voting does not conform and cannot conform with these CDC guidelines. We cannot conduct this election tomorrow."
Mike DeWine, Republican governor of Ohio, is such a great example of a pre-Trump Republican who is acting responsibly and thoughtfully and doing the right thing. And then you have these goobers like the governor of Oklahoma who's tweeting selfies with his kids, and Devin Nunes. I mean, thank you to all these. Tom Cotton just put up a tweet storm where he recommended all kinds of good ideas, including essentially universal basic income for people suffering right now.
Tom Cotton usually sucks.
He is one of the worst.
Well, you know
So
why? Because
good for
Tom
them.
Cotton is a raptor testing the fences, and he is. We should all watch Tom Cotton. We should watch Josh Hawley, because these are people who are who know what Trump is doing and what's working and what won't, and they are watching very, very closely. It's just
Mike
watch Tom
DeWine falls
Cotton.
into the category of sort of the old school country club Republicans,
Totally.
like your Mitt Romney, who we'll talk about soon, and Larry Hogan in Maryland, and Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, those two governors who are also doing the right thing during this. So, and Tommy, you were over the weekend talking about how annoyed you were that everyone was talking about this through it's a partisan lens, but it's like there's a bunch of Republican governors doing the right thing along with a bunch of Democratic governors. It is Trump and his fucking cult that is going to get us all killed.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily just Democrat versus Republican.
Look, he's a fringe extreme example, but Donald Trump went on Alex Jones's show on InfoWars. Right now, Alex Jones is selling random weird supplements that he said will protect you from the coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's going to get people killed.
All right, let's talk about the economic situation. Even though the Fed announced another round of emergency rate cuts, the Dow is in free fall again, down about 2,000 points when we started recording. And most economists predict we're almost certainly headed for a deep recession if we're not already in one, though the president's top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said this morning that, quote, "This is a great opportunity to buy stocks," and that, quote, "the fundamentals of the economy are still strong." Everyone remember that one?
I do.
Playing the old hits from 2008.
There's nothing more alarming than Larry Kudlow saying buy, because when Larry Kudlow says buy, a lot of people sell.
Yeah.
The House passed a coronavirus response bill early Saturday morning after final negotiations between Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. It includes paid sick leave, free coronavirus testing, food assistance funding, and strengthened unemployment benefits. However, the sick leave provisions only cover about 20% of American workers because it exempts both large and small businesses from some of the requirements. Guys, does this bill go far enough, and why hasn't it passed yet?
No, it doesn't go far enough. Well, it hasn't passed yet because Mitch McConnell needed the weekend off, presumably to, I don't know, sleep upside down or give
He was
a
hanging
donor
with
a
Brett
back rub.
Kavanaugh at some event.
But
Mitch
look,
McConnell only feeds every 28 days.
right, right. Look, I want to give credit to the House Democrats and to Speaker Pelosi in particular for fighting with Secretary Mnuchin as hard as she possibly can to get something done. Katie Porter, in our interview later, is crystal clear that it's insufficient. I think we need to do much, much, much more. I have to say, over the weekend, Mnuchin was the one guy at these press conferences that actually seemed to get how big a deal this was and want to be proactive and bipartisan and work with the other side to get something done. But no, this isn't enough.
Yeah, go ahead, Lovett.
No, it's striking. It does remind me a bit of 2008 in that, in the same way the Democratic primary in 2008 was about change, and then in the final days of the election, it became about who could stably take over and run the country amidst crisis.
Yeah.
And I was struck that Joe Biden in the debate went back to the financial crisis, which is actually something that hasn't been central to our conversation yet. And thinking this through, we talk about Ebola, we talk about SARS, we talk about all those other diseases. And then you realize, wait, this is unprecedented. This is a financial crisis now. And it was striking to see Biden go back to that, because it does seem as though suddenly a conversation about how to get rid of Trump, which remains urgent, becomes also a conversation about who's best to lead during an emergency.
So much of the critique of the response to the financial crisis in 2008 has to do with, too many bad actors were bailed out that shouldn't have been. And we could debate that for a long time. But one of the lessons that I have learned from it is there was a fear about proposing an economic stimulus package that was too big because politically it wouldn't get through the Congress. And so you had people like Larry Summers and Tim Geithner probably knowing that you needed a bigger response to such an economic shock, but thinking we're not going to be able to get it through because we don't have the votes. And I think learning from that this time around, like, you're already seeing, as we just said, Tom Cotton of all people talking about a cash payment of direct cash payments to Americans. You're seeing Mitt Romney talk about a $1,000 cash payment to Americans. Ro Khanna in the House, Democrat Ro Khanna and Tim Ryan co-sponsored a bill last week that would be $1,000 to $6,000 per month to Americans. And I think, for all the good faith negotiations between Pelosi and Mnuchin, Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate have to think pretty hard and propose the most ambitious package they can think of and talk about it publicly and fight for it. And if you don't get it, right, if Republicans stand in the way, if Trump stands in the way, then so be it. But go as big as you think we need to. That is the lesson from 2008. And do not be shy about this. Don't start counting the votes in your head now. Propose the biggest thing you can do and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, I also do think one of the lessons is that thankfully a bunch of Republicans were pretending to believe in austerity and pretending to believe that stimulus doesn't work, because now all of a sudden when there's a Republican president, suddenly they discovered that stimulus works.
Yeah.
The other pieces of it too, and I think this is why it's amazing how quickly we go from universal basic income as a quirky idea from a quirky candidate to an embraced, widely held position during a time of crisis. But
Yang gang.
Yang gang. Seriously, I wonder how quickly the country, Andrew Yang absolutely softened the ground for that as something people were aware of, understood. But one of the lessons too of the financial crisis is people felt as though the worst people were being helped and they weren't seeing the benefit.
Yeah.
And so I do think that going to a simple, big help to everyone is the right thing.
This is also just a cleaner example, right? I mean, a bunch of bankers and people peddling mortgage-backed securities did awful, horrible things that unraveled the economy and hurt all of us. In this instance, no one is to blame for a pandemic. And so
other than Trump,
that helps. Well, look, he's to blame for exacerbating it. But like cynically, I think our best hope, as you sort of said, Lovett, is Republicans not wanting to own a financial disaster with Trump having this much runway between the election. But like what makes me apoplectic when I sit on Twitter all day and read about it is knowing that like Jared has his like little teenage goober Avi Berkowitz and Hope Hicks working on it. It's like that's the level of brains and mind share in the White House. He doesn't have a chief of staff. He wakes up in the morning and he tweets about Hillary's Benghazi emails and Judicial Watch. So there is no seriousness of purpose coming out of the White House. We really need Congress, and which is why I'm heartened by like a Tom Cotton tweet like that, to take this on and just push it through.
Yeah, and look, you're right that there's not bad actors involved in this like last time, but they're already talking about what the bailout package for the airline will look like. And again, the airlines didn't cause this, so it's not their fault like it was the bankers' fault, but a bunch of people are going to see a lot of money end up going to airlines and other big industries that probably has to go to them because they employ a lot of people who are going to be out of work, and that stuff snowballs very, very quickly. It's not just to help the CEOs of these companies, it's to help the thousands and millions of workers who are in, the restaurant industry, the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, the airline industry, who could be out of work for quite a bit.
This is also why it's so dangerous to have someone as this is why it's so dangerous to have someone so untrustworthy as Donald Trump in this job, because we also know that he's taken calls from shale gas billionaires and his buddies saying, help me here, help me there. Donald Trump owns hotels. We know he's not as rich as he says because we know how much he needs the regular income to keep his whole fake operation afloat. So, we're in this situation with completely unreliable, untrustworthy human beings at the helm. And this is it. 3 years it took to get here, but man, few things have been as well predicted as the switch to streaming and Donald Trump failing in a crisis. We all knew that eventually we would switch from cable boxes to streaming. They predicted it for years, and then it happened. We all knew that Donald Trump was a fundamental risk in that he was completely unable to manage a crisis like this, and now we're in it, and he is making
so close to the election, so close,
and we almost made it.
Yeah, it's just bailing these companies out is so awful in the near term, and it was so thoroughly demagogued, and it's easy to attack these people. We all need to remember that TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, and the auto bailout was paid back. And in fact, it yielded like billions in profit. So these things are so painful in the short term. The headlines are so awful when a bunch of assholes on Wall Street paid themselves big bonuses. And yes, I would have loved to have seen them in jail either, but hopefully we can just focus on the big problem and the solutions.
And the answer is to take care of the people being hurt more than we have before. Yeah. And if you want to beat up on some companies, which everyone wants to do, this paid sick leave thing, Pelosi tweeted, the paid sick leave is basically the government funding paid sick leave, and it's not a regulation on the companies to do that. But so all these very big companies got off the hook here, and Pelosi said, well, we don't want to have the government, the taxpayer funding, what these companies should be doing on their own. And I do think that there should be pressure on some of the big companies that do not offer paid sick leave right now, not the smaller ones that are struggling in this, but the very big ones. McDonald's, Walmart, those are the two biggest companies in America that don't offer paid sick leave, 800,000 workers combined. There's also Kroger's, Subway, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Taco Bell, Target, Publix. Like, these are very, very large companies that do not offer a good paid sick leave thing. And if you're out there, you should pressure them to do so.
Yeah, it's also just worth noting, too, that the seasonal flu kills tens of thousands of people. And every day, people have to go to work when they're sick with the flu.
Yeah.
And so, as we put pressure on these companies, I do think it's all of us worth remembering what this moment feels like, because a miniature version of coronavirus happens for families every single day. Do I go to work? Do I keep my kid home? How do I stay home when I need the shift? All of that happens constantly, and we ignore it at our peril.
Yeah, and to your point, John, like, we should be pressuring those companies. And let me tell you, no way in hell I am going to a business or a restaurant that does not offer its employees paid sick leave right now, because that means odds are someone in there has the coronavirus and it's just working anyway. And fuck you to the CEOs who put them in that position, and we as consumers should punish that CEO.
Well said. And now Tommy's going to talk about all this stuff more with another crusader, consumer crusader, Representative Katie Porter. That'll be up when we come back. Look, I've enjoyed doing this episode for a very long time because it's just nice being around. Being around more people.
Yeah, buckle up for some long pods.
Emily and I are just sitting home and going stir crazy. It's nice to talk to some folks.
Yeah, I appreciate the respectful distance we're all keeping at the moment.
Yeah, there's only 6 of us here, all separately, spaced out by 6 feet. How you guys doing? Everyone good?
I mean, look, this sucks.
Yeah,
and I think it's going to get a lot worse. Not to be a total downer, but I think in a week we are going to look at the steps that are being taken today and think it was crazy that they weren't taken earlier. I think you're going to see numbers spiking of people who have the coronavirus or are seeking treatment. I mean, I think everyone should just mentally prepare themselves. This is going to get way, way, way worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also just think one thing that I'm sort of feeling and realizing is like, oh, right. this is unprecedented. This is deeply strange. This is scary. No one really knows exactly how it's going to end, how it's going to play out, because we are in unknown territory, and just giving ourselves the space to just be okay with that and give everyone at your job, at your school, in your life, the space to figure it out while following the advice, I just think is important.
Yeah, I think being patient with people and being kind and compassionate and empathetic at this time is important, because everyone is freaked out. And like you said, Tommy, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And we just got to be able to pull through here. It does feel like feels like going through 9/11. It feels like what it did in the financial crisis. Only this is even more uncertain in terms of how long it's going to last.
Yeah, I'm all for. I'm big into patience and empathy and caring about people, with the exception of public officials.
Oh yeah.
I
was talking about each other.
That
Drive
goes
them like they're running your Viking
Donald
ship.
Trump. That goes for Mayor de Blasio, who went to the fucking gym today. It's just, come on, everybody.
Yeah.
Look,
Tighten it up.
In a difficult moment, could Ronan and I fight over the PlayStation 4 controller? Sure, we could. But that's not what we're going to do right now. Not when all this is going on.
Yeah.
We're going to alternate an hour plus a little buffer time to get to a safe point.
And and take care of other people too. If you have extra money, if you can donate, food banks need help. A lot of people have had a great idea where, if your local restaurant's in trouble, buy a gift certificate to your local restaurant that you can use later. People who have the means, who are able, reach out to some people who are really going to be hurting through this too. Yeah. So that would be great. All right, we will continue to be doing these podcasts as long as we can in this thing. So we will hopefully, Dan and I will talk to you on Thursday, and then we'll be around later. Bye, everyone.